The distress signal came through at 3 in the morning, ship time. Captain Laura was asleep in her quarters when the alarm pulled her out of a dreamless rest. She was on her feet and moving before her eyes fully opened. 15 years in space had trained her body to respond before her mind caught up. She reached the bridge of the horizon's edge in under 2 minutes. Her first officer, Daniel, was already there. His dark eyes were fixed on the communication screen, and his face told her everything she needed to know. This was bad. "What do we have?" Laura asked as she dropped into the captain's chair. Daniel turned to face her. "Galactic Union vessel, diplomatic transport called the Eternal Dawn. They're about 4 hours from our position at maximum speed." "And the problem?" "Reactor failure. Catastrophic. Their captain says they have maybe 6 hours before the whole ship tears itself apart." Laura did the math in her head. 4 hours to reach them. That left 2 hours to do something useful. 2 hours to save a ship she had never seen, filled with species she had barely met. The numbers were not good. "How many souls on board?" she asked. Daniel checked his screen. Over 3,000, 12 different species, diplomats, staff, families. They were heading to a peace summit in the system. Laura closed her eyes for a moment. 3,000 lives. Her ship had a crew of 15 humans and enough cargo space to hold maybe 200 people if they packed them tight. The math still did not work. "Has anyone else responded to the signal?" she asked. "The nearest Union fleet is 9 hours out. They've already written the Eternal Dawn off. They're sending ships to collect debris and investigate the cause." "They've given up." "Yes, Captain, they have." Laura opened her eyes and looked around her bridge. The horizon's edge was a freighter. It hauled medical supplies and farming equipment between colony worlds. It was not a rescue ship. It was not built for heroics, but it was here and it was close, and that had to mean something. "Wake the crew," she said. "All hands, tell them we're going in." Daniel did not argue. He simply nodded and reached for the intercom. Within 10 minutes, all 15 members of the crew were assembled on the bridge. They were tired and confused, but they were ready. That was what Laura loved about her people. They did not ask why. They asked what needed to be done. She explained the situation in simple terms. A ship was dying. Thousands of people were going to die with it unless someone did something. The Union had given up. No one else was coming. "We're 15 people," said Sam Porter, the chief engineer. He was a large man with graying hair and hands that had fixed more broken machines than he could count. "What exactly are we supposed to do against a catastrophic reactor failure on a ship 10 times our size?" "I don't know yet," Laura admitted. "But we're going to figure it out on the way. We have 4 hours to come up with a plan." "And if we can't come up with one?" asked Sam's young assistant. She was barely 25, but she had a sharp mind and steady hands. "Then at least we tried. At least those people will know someone came for them." The crew exchanged glances. Laura could see the doubt in their eyes. She could also see something else. She could see the same stubborn refusal to quit that had brought humans out of their caves and into the stars. They were scared, but they were not going to run. "Set course for the Eternal Dawn," Laura ordered. "Maximum speed. Sam, I want you in going over everything we know about ship design. Find me weaknesses and opportunities. Daniel, coordinate with their captain. Get me deck plans, crew manifests, everything they can send." The bridge erupted into activity. Laura watched her people work and felt a strange calm settle over her. The odds were terrible. The situation was impossible, but impossible had never stopped humans before. 4 hours later, the horizon's edge dropped out of faster-than-light travel and got its first look at the Eternal Dawn. The sight made Laura's heart sink. The diplomatic vessel was massive, easily a kilometer long. Its elegant curves were now marred by scorch marks and hull breaches. Escape pods dotted the surrounding space like scattered seeds, but there were not nearly enough of them. Most of the passengers were still trapped inside. "We're being hailed," Daniel reported. "Put them through." The main screen flickered to life, showing a face that was not human. They were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Ambassador looked exhausted and afraid, but she held herself with dignity. "Human vessel," she said, her voice carrying the musical tones of her species. "We are grateful for your response, but I must be honest with you. Our situation is beyond salvage. Our engineers have done everything possible. The reactor will breach within 5 hours. We have already lost 400 people." "Ambassador," Laura replied, "my name is Captain Laura. We're coming aboard to help with the evacuation and rescue efforts." His large eyes blinked slowly. "Captain, I do not think you understand. Your ship cannot hold even a fraction of our passengers, and our internal conditions are deteriorating rapidly. Radiation leaks, structural failures, fires. You would be sending your crew into a death trap." "I understand perfectly. We're still coming." There was a long pause, seemed to be searching for words. "Why? You owe us nothing. Humans are new to the galactic community. No one would blame you for keeping a safe distance." Laura leaned forward in her chair. "Ambassador, where I come from, we have a saying. You don't leave people behind. Not ever. Not when there's still a chance. Now, are you going to let us dock, or do we have to find our own way in?" Another pause. Then something shifted in its expression. It was not hope exactly. It was more like curiosity, like she was seeing something she had never seen before and did not quite know how to process it. "Docking Bay 7 is still functional," the ambassador said finally. "I will have guides waiting for you. And Captain, thank you. Even if this changes nothing, thank you for coming." The screen went dark. Laura stood up and headed for the airlock. Behind her, she heard her crew falling into step, 15 humans against impossible odds. It was not the first time their species had faced such numbers. She had a feeling it would not be the last. The airlock hissed open and Laura led her crew into the dying ship. Somewhere in the distance, metal groaned and alarms wailed. The air smelled like smoke and fear, but Laura did not hesitate. She simply walked forward because that was what humans did. They walked toward the fire when everyone else ran away. And sometimes, against all logic and reason, they won. The interior of the Eternal Dawn was worse than Laura had imagined. Emergency lights cast everything in a dim red glow. The walls were warm to the touch, heated by fires burning somewhere deep in the ship. Smoke drifted through the corridors like ghosts, and the constant groan of stressed metal made it feel like the vessel itself was crying out in pain. A group of officers met them at the docking bay. They were tall and elegant, even in crisis, but their large eyes betrayed their fear. The leader introduced himself as commander. He looked at the small group of humans with barely hidden disappointment. 15, he said, counting them. "You brought 15 people." 15 is what I have, Laura replied. "It will have to be enough. Now I need a full status report. Where are your passengers gathered? What sections are still safe? And where exactly is your reactor?" Seemed taken aback by her directness. They were a formal species, accustomed to lengthy greetings and careful protocols. Laura did not have time for any of that. "The reactor is on deck 47, said after a moment. "Our engineers are attempting repairs, but the containment field is failing. Radiation has already spread to decks 45 through 50. Those areas have been sealed." "And the passengers?" "Gathered in the main halls on decks 10 through 20. We have been trying to organize an evacuation to the remaining escape pods, but there are not enough pods for everyone. We have been prioritizing the young and the elderly." Laura nodded. It was a sensible approach, but it was not enough. Evacuation alone would not save everyone. They needed to buy more time. "Sam," she said, turning to her chief engineer, "take and head down to deck 47. I want eyes on that reactor. Find out what the engineers have tried and figure out what they have not." Sam's expression was grim, but he did not argue. "On it, Captain." "Grace," Laura continued, addressing her medic, "set up triage stations on decks 15 and 18. Recruit anyone who can help. I don't care what species they are. If they have hands and can follow instructions, put them to work." Grace nodded. She was a small woman with kind eyes and a will of iron. "I'll need supplies, medical equipment, bandages, pain medication." "Take whatever you can find. Commander, can you assign someone to help her locate your medical storage?" Hesitated for only a second before gesturing to one of his officers. The move to Grace's side, and the two of them disappeared down a corridor. Laura watched them go, then turned back to the remaining crew. "The rest of you split into teams of 2. I want every deck between here and the reactor mapped and assessed. Find survivors, identify hazards, and report back every 30 minutes. Daniel, you're with me. We're going to the bridge." The crew dispersed with quiet efficiency. Within minutes, humans were spreading through the dying ship like blood cells fighting an infection. They moved fast, spoke little, and did not waste a single moment on doubt or fear. Laura and Daniel made their way to the bridge. The journey took them through corridors filled with frightened passengers. Most were, but Laura spotted other species as well. The clustered in tight groups, their clicking language filling the air with nervous sound. The aquatic sat in portable tanks, their gills fluttering with stress. Smaller species she did not recognize huddled in corners, watching the humans pass with wide eyes. Ambassador was waiting for them on the bridge. She stood at the center of the room, surrounded by officers who were clearly struggling to maintain control. Screens flickered with warning messages. Consoles sparked and smoked. The ship was falling apart around them, and everyone knew it. Captain said, "Your people have already begun moving through the ship. My officers report that they are organizing rescue efforts without waiting for authorization." "Is that a problem?" "It is unusual. The way is to establish clear chains of command before taking action. Your people seem to act first and coordinate later." Laura almost smiled. "That's one way to put it. We call it adapting to the situation." Studied her for a long moment. "Your engineer and his assistant have reached Deck 47. They are speaking with my engineering team now. I must warn you, Captain, my engineers are the finest in the Union. If they cannot solve this problem, I do not see how two humans can make a difference." "With respect, Ambassador, your engineers are thinking like Sam and think like humans. Sometimes a different perspective is all you need." Deep in the ship, Sam Porter stood in front of the reactor core and shook his head. The engineers had explained the problem 3 times, and each time the solution they proposed was the same. Reinforce the containment field. Increase power to the stabilizers. Follow the standard protocols. "The protocols aren't working," Sam said flatly. The lead engineer, a thin male named, bristled at the statement. "The protocols are designed for exactly this situation. They have been refined over centuries. And yet here we are." Sam walked closer to the reactor, studying the readings on his handheld scanner. "Your containment field is at 12% and dropping. You can't reinforce something that's already failing. You need to try something else." "There is nothing else. These are the accepted methods." Had been quietly examining the surrounding systems while Sam argued. Now she looked up, her young face lit with an idea. "What if we vent it?" Stared at her. "Vent what?" "The pressure, the heat, everything that's building up inside the containment zone." She pointed to a schematic on a nearby screen. "These sections here, 46 and 48, they're already empty, right? Evacuated because of radiation." "Yes, but I do not see how that helps." "We open them to space. All of them. Create a massive pressure differential around the reactor. The cold vacuum will absorb some of the heat buildup, and the pressure change will slow the cascade failure." His expression shifted from confusion to horror. "You want to deliberately decompress half the ship?" "Just the empty parts, the parts where people are already dead or gone." "That is insane. The structural stress alone could tear the hull apart." Sam grinned. It was not a happy expression. "Maybe, but right now your hull is definitely going to tear apart. Our way gives you a chance. A small one, but better than nothing." The engineers looked at each other. They had been trained their entire lives to follow procedures, to trust in tested methods, to avoid risks. What the humans were proposing went against everything they knew. But everything they knew was not working. Back on the bridge, Ambassador received Sam's proposal via communicator. She listened in silence, her face unreadable. When Sam finished speaking, she looked at Laura. "Your engineer wants to deliberately destroy parts of my ship. He wants to save the rest of it. This is not how to do things." "No," Laura agreed. "It's how humans do things. We break rules, we take risks, we do whatever it takes." She stepped closer to the ambassador. "You asked me earlier why we came. This is why. Because when everything else fails, sometimes you need someone crazy enough to try the thing nobody else would consider." Was quiet for a long time. Around her, the ship groaned and shuddered. Another alarm began to wail. They were running out of time. "Do it," she said finally. "Tell your engineer to do whatever he thinks is necessary." Laura relayed the order. Deep in the ship, Sam Porter smiled and got to work. The impossible was about to become possible. And they were about to learn what humans were truly capable of. The decompression began at hour 3. Sam worked side by side with the engineers, manually overriding safety locks and opening hull sections to the void of space. The ship screamed as atmosphere rushed out into the darkness. Metal twisted and groaned. Warning lights painted everything in shades of emergency red. On Deck 15, Grace felt the vibration through the floor and knew something major was happening. She did not have time to wonder what. Her hands were inside the chest cavity of a child, trying to stop internal bleeding caused by a falling beam. The child's mother stood nearby, silent tears running down her blue face. "Clamp," Grace said, holding out her hand. The worker beside her clicked in confusion. The species did not use the same tools as humanoid medics. Grace had spent the last hour teaching them the basics, but there was still a language barrier that no translator could fully bridge. "The metal thing that pinches," Grace clarified, "looks like this." She made a pinching motion with her fingers. Understanding flickered in the compound eyes. A clamp was placed in Grace's palm. She applied it quickly, stemming the flow of blood. The child's vital signs stabilized. Grace let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "She will live?" the mother asked, her voice trembling. "She will live, but she needs rest. Can you take her to the recovery area on deck 16? The mother gathered her daughter in her arms and hurried away. Grace watched them go, then turned to face the next patient. There were dozens more waiting. There would be no rest for her tonight. The worker clicked something that the translator rendered as a question. "You have been working for 6 hours without pause. Do humans not require rest?" "We do," Grace admitted. "But we can push through when we have to. It's called adrenaline. Our bodies produce it during emergencies. It keeps us going past our normal limits. And afterward we collapse and sleep for a very long time. But that's a problem for later." They considered this. Among their species, workers operated in strict shifts. The idea of pushing past biological limits was foreign and somewhat disturbing. But they had watched Grace save 17 lives in 6 hours, and they could not argue with results. "We will help you," they said. "Tell us what to do and we will do it." Grace smiled despite her exhaustion. "That's all I ask." On the bridge, Laura was receiving reports from across the ship. Ben Torres, her navigator, had been awake for 18 hours straight. He sat at a console normally meant for officers, running calculations and mapping evacuation routes through the damaged sections. A delegate floated in a portable tank nearby, watching Ben work. The aquatic species were known for their long memories and careful observation. This particular, whose name translated roughly as flowing current, had been silently studying the humans since they arrived. "You have not slept," Flowing Current observed, their voice bubbling through a translator device. "No time," Ben replied without looking up. "There are still 300 people trapped in Section 9. I'm trying to find them a way out." The engineers already calculated the routes. They said Section 9 is inaccessible. Their calculations assumed we wouldn't be willing to go through the damaged areas. They were wrong. Flowing Current's fins rippled with interest. "You would send your people through areas with radiation exposure and structural instability." "If that's what it takes, we'll rotate teams, limit exposure, and move fast. It's risky, but it's better than leaving 300 people to die. Among my species, such a risk would be considered unacceptable. The mathematical probability of loss outweighs the potential gain." Ben finally looked up from his console. His eyes were red and tired, but his voice was steady. "That's the difference between us, I guess. We don't think of lives as math problems. Every person we save is worth the risk." Flowing Current was silent for a long moment. Then they said something that surprised Ben. "I think I understand now why the Union has been so interested in your species. You are not logical, but perhaps logic is not always the answer." Down on deck 47, the venting plan was working. Sam watched the temperature readings drop as the cold of space drew heat away from the failing reactor. The pressure differential had slowed the cascade failure, just as predicted. They had bought the ship another 3 hours at least. But Sam knew it would not be enough. The reactor was still failing. The venting had only delayed the inevitable. They needed another miracle. "What if we reroute power from the secondary systems?" suggested. She was covered in sweat and machine oil, but her mind was still sharp. "Channel everything into the containment field for one massive burst. It might reset the whole system." "Or it might blow up in our faces," Sam replied. "Well, yes, there's that." The engineer had been listening. His attitude toward the humans had changed over the past few hours. He had watched them work, watched them take risks, watched them refuse to give up. It was not the way, but he was beginning to see its value. "There is another option," said slowly. "Something we considered but rejected as too dangerous." "More dangerous than what we've already done?" Sam asked. "Much more. The reactor core has a manual override, a physical lever that can be pulled to initiate emergency shutdown, but it is located inside the containment zone. Anyone who goes in there would receive a lethal dose of radiation. Sam and exchanged glances. A lethal dose for a might not be lethal for a human. Their species had evolved on a world full of natural radiation sources. They were tougher than most aliens realized. "How lethal are we talking?" Sam asked. Pulled up the readings on his screen. "For a death within minutes, for other species perhaps hours. I do not know the human tolerance." Sam studied the numbers. They were bad, really bad, but maybe not impossible. "I'll need a suit," he said. "The best radiation shielding you have." Sam grabbed his arm. "Let me do it. I'm younger. My cells might recover better." "You're also the one who's going to have to finish this if I don't come back. You're smarter than me. You know that. The ship needs you more than it needs me." "That's not true." "It is, and we both know it." Sam gently removed her hand from his arm. "Tell the captain what we're doing, and tell her I said this was my choice." Was already gathering the radiation suit. His hands were trembling slightly. He had never seen anyone volunteer for certain death before. They did not work that way. They calculated odds and minimized risks. They did not sacrifice themselves. But as he watched Sam Porter climb into the suit, he realized that maybe the way was not the only way. Maybe sometimes you needed someone willing to walk into the fire. On the bridge, Laura received Sam's message. Her face went pale, but her voice remained steady. "Tell him to wait," she ordered. "We might find another way." Captain Daniel said softly, "There is no other way. Sam knows that. We all know that." Laura closed her eyes. In 15 years of captaining ships, she had never lost a crew member. She had always found a way to bring everyone home, but some situations had no good answers. Some situations only had sacrifices. "Tell him," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "that I'm proud of him, and that will make sure it counts." The message was relayed. Deep in the ship, Sam Porter smiled and stepped toward the containment door, behind him, and watched in silence. Humans, the engineer thought, they are absolutely insane. And then, with something like reverence, he added, they are also magnificent. Sam Porter moved through the containment zone like a man walking through a nightmare. The radiation suit was thick and heavy, designed for bodies that were taller and thinner than his own. Every step was a struggle. Every breath fogged the inside of his helmet. The warnings on his suit display were screaming at him. Radiation levels were climbing with every meter he advanced. His body was absorbing poison with every second, but Sam kept walking. The manual override lever was only 50 meters away. He could make it. He had to make it. Outside the containment zone, watched on a monitor. Tears were streaming down her face, but she did not wipe them away. Stood beside her, his face unreadable. "His radiation exposure has exceeded safe limits," said quietly. "Even if he reaches the lever, even if he pulls it, the damage to his body may be irreversible." "He knows," whispered. "He's always known." "Then why did he go?" Turned to look at the alien engineer. "Because that's what we do. When someone has to take the risk, we don't ask who should. We just go. Sam's been an engineer for 30 years. He's lived a good life. He told me once that if he ever had to die, he wanted it to mean something." Struggled to process this. They valued life above all else. They would never willingly sacrifice themselves for strangers. It was not logical. It was not sensible. And yet, watching Sam Porter's slow progress on the monitor felt something he had never felt before. He felt admiration. On the bridge, Laura was coordinating the next phase of the rescue. Even if Sam succeeded, even if the reactor stabilized, the ship's hull was failing. The earlier decompression had bought them time, but the structural damage was severe. The Eternal Dawn was literally holding itself together through the remaining integrity of its frame, and that frame was cracking. "We need to reinforce the hull from the outside," Daniel said. "It's the only way to keep the ship together long enough for the Union fleet to arrive." "The outside?" Laura stared at him. "You want to do EVA repairs on a ship that's falling apart?" "I want to try. We have tow cables on the horizon's edge, cargo nets, welding equipment. We can wrap the damaged sections like bandages on a wound. It won't be pretty, but it might hold." Laura looked at the structural readouts on the main screen. The mathematics were clear. The ship would break apart within 2 hours. Daniel's plan was insane. It was also their only option. Take everyone who's EVA certified, she said. That's you, Ben, and Maria, 3 people to hold a kilometer-long ship together. We'll make it work. Daniel, Laura caught his arm as he turned to leave. Be careful out there. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Careful is for people who have better options. Then he was gone, and Laura was left alone on a bridge full of aliens who were watching her with expressions she could not quite read. Ambassador approached. Her blue face was drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes were clear. Your people continue to surprise me, Captain. How so? When I first saw your ship, I thought you were fools. 15 humans against a disaster of this scale. It seemed like arrogance or perhaps ignorance, but now I understand that I was wrong. What do you understand now? Was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. I understand that humans do not think the way we do. They calculate odds, we assess risks, we make logical decisions based on probable outcomes, but humans seem to ignore probability entirely. You simply decide what needs to be done and then you do it, regardless of the cost. Sometimes that's all you can do. Perhaps, but among my people, such behavior would be considered madness. We would never ask our officers to risk their lives in the way your crew has today. Laura turned to face the ambassador fully. That's the thing, Ambassador, I didn't ask. I told them the situation and they volunteered, every single one of them, because that's who we are. We're the species that runs toward danger instead of away from it. We're the ones who pull people out of burning buildings and dive into freezing water to save strangers. It's not logical, it's not sensible, but it's human. Deep in the ship, Sam reached the manual override lever. His vision was blurring, his hands were shaking. The radiation was eating him alive from the inside out, but he was there. He had made it. The lever was bigger than he expected, designed for hands with their long fingers. Sam grabbed it with both hands and pulled. Nothing happened. The mechanism was stuck, probably damaged by the radiation or the heat. Sam pulled harder. His muscles screamed in protest. His suit's alarm was a constant wail in his ears. Pull harder, harder. The lever refused to move. For a moment, Sam thought about giving up. The pain was becoming unbearable. His body wanted to collapse, to surrender, to stop fighting. It would be so easy to just let go. Then he thought about Laura, about the 15 humans who had followed their captain into the impossible. He thought about the 3,000 aliens on the ship, the families and diplomats and workers who were counting on him without even knowing his name. Sam Porter was not a hero. He was just an engineer who fixed broken things. But right now, this ship was the most broken thing he had ever seen, and he was going to fix it or die trying. He adjusted his grip on the lever. He braced his feet against the floor. He took a deep breath that burned all the way down. And then he pulled with everything he had. The lever moved, slowly at first, then faster as the mechanism finally gave way. Sam heard a deep rumble as the emergency shutdown sequence activated. Warning lights changed from red to amber. Alarms shifted in pitch. The reactor was stabilizing. Sam collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. His suit's display showed radiation levels that would have killed most species instantly. He was probably dying, but the reactor was safe. The ship would survive. Outside the containment zone, saw the readings change and let out a sob of relief. He did it, she said. He actually did it. Was already moving toward the containment door. We have to get him out of there. Every second he stays inside increases the damage. They rushed in together, the and the human, working side by side to drag Sam's unconscious body out of the radiation zone. Stripped off his helmet and checked his pulse. It was weak but present. He's alive, she reported, but he needs medical attention immediately. On the hull of the Eternal Dawn, Daniel and his team were fighting a different battle. The vacuum of space was absolute and unforgiving. One mistake, one torn suit, one moment of carelessness, and they would die. But they kept working, welding cables to the ship's surface and stringing cargo nets across the widening cracks in the hull. Maria Santos, the Horizon's edge pilot, worked beside Daniel with steady hands. She had not slept in 20 hours. Her oxygen supply was running low. But she kept welding, kept connecting, kept holding the broken ship together through sheer determination. Ben Torres joined them after finishing his navigation work. He was not technically EVA certified, but he had insisted on helping anyway. His welding was sloppy compared to the others, but every connection helped. How much longer? Maria asked through the suit radio. Daniel checked the structural readouts on his wrist display. Another hour at least, maybe 2. My oxygen runs out in 45 minutes. Then we'll share, rotate back to the ship, refill, come back out. We don't stop until this is done. Maria nodded inside her helmet. She did not argue. None of them did. They simply kept working, 3 humans against the void, fighting to save a ship full of strangers. On the bridge, Laura watched the external cameras and felt a pride so intense it almost hurt. Her crew was scattered across a dying ship, each of them pushing past their limits, each of them refusing to give up. This was humanity, not their ships or their weapons or their technology. This was what made them special. This was what made them worth remembering. And somewhere out there, a Galactic Union fleet was racing toward them, still hours away, still expecting to find only wreckage and death. They were going to be very surprised. The Galactic Union fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel expecting to find debris. Instead, they found the Eternal Dawn still in one piece, held together by cables and cargo nets and human stubbornness. Admiral, the commander of the rescue fleet, stared at his in disbelief. "That is not possible," he said quietly. His tactical officer checked the sensors 3 times before responding. "It is real, Admiral. The Eternal Dawn is intact. Structural integrity at 43% and holding. Life signs indicate over 3,000 survivors." "How?" "We calculated the collapse time. The reactor failure alone should have destroyed the ship hours ago." "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the vessel. A human is requesting permission to speak with you." His expression shifted. Humans. Of course it was humans. The strange species from the death world at the edge of known space. He had heard the stories, but he had always assumed they were exaggerated. "Put them through," he ordered. Captain Laura appeared on his screen. She looked exhausted beyond words. Her uniform was stained with smoke and sweat, but her eyes were bright and her voice was steady. "Admiral, I'm Captain Laura of the cargo freighter Horizon's Edge. We responded to the Eternal Dawn's distress signal approximately 9 hours ago. The ship has been stabilized, but we have wounded that need immediate medical attention. How fast can you get your medical teams over here?" Found himself speechless for a moment. This human, this captain of a tiny freighter, was giving him orders as if she were in charge. The most remarkable part was that she seemed completely unaware of how extraordinary the situation was. "Medical teams are being dispatched now," he said finally. "Captain, I must ask, how did you accomplish this? Our calculations showed the Eternal Dawn was beyond saving." Laura smiled, but there was sadness in it. "We ignored the calculations, Admiral. Turns out humans are pretty good at that." The rescue operation took another 6 hours. Union medical ships docked with the Eternal Dawn and began evacuating the wounded. Sam Porter was among the first to be transferred. The radiation damage to his body was severe but not fatal. The Union doctors were amazed. Any other species would have died within minutes of the exposure he had received. Humans, apparently, were built differently. Grace finally stopped working when Union medics physically removed her from the triage station. She had been awake for over 30 hours. She had saved 42 lives. When she finally closed her eyes on a Union medical bed, she slept for 18 hours straight. Daniel and his EVA team returned to the Horizon's Edge covered in metal dust and welding burns. Maria's hands were so cramped from hours of work that she could not remove her own gloves. Ben had to help her. None of them complained. They simply showered, ate whatever food was available, and collapsed into their bunks. Stayed by Sam's side during the transfer to the medical ship. Came with her, refusing to leave the humans who had saved his vessel. Over the past hours, something had changed in the engineer. He no longer saw humans as reckless or foolish. He saw them as something else entirely. Ambassador requested a formal meeting with Captain before the Horizon's Edge departed. They met in the ambassador's temporary quarters on the Union flagship. "I owe you a debt," began. "A debt that cannot be repaid in any currency I possess." "You don't owe me anything," Laura replied. "We did what anyone would do." "No, Captain, you did what no one else would do, what no one else could do. I have served the Galactic Union for over 40 years. I have seen many species in many situations. I have never seen anything like what your crew accomplished today." Laura shifted uncomfortably. She had never been good at accepting praise. "We just refused to give up. That's not special. That's just human." Large eyes studied her carefully. "You say that as if it is a small thing, But I have watched your people today. I have watched them work past exhaustion, risk their lives for strangers, sacrifice their own safety for beings they had never met. Among the, such behavior would be considered irrational, but I am beginning to think that rationality is not always the highest virtue. The ambassador paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. The Galactic Union has been debating humanity's place in our community since your species first made contact. Some argued that you were too young, too violent, too unpredictable. Today, you have proven them wrong, not through diplomacy or treaties or grand speeches, through action, through courage, through simply being human. Laura did not know what to say. She had come to this ship to save lives, not to make political statements. But she was beginning to understand that she had done both. What happens now? She asked. Now the Union Council will receive my report. I will tell them what I witnessed today. I will tell them that humans are not just another species to be categorized and filed away. You are something new, something remarkable, and I believe the galaxy will be better for having you in it. The meeting ended shortly after. Laura returned to the horizon's edge and gathered her crew on the bridge. They were all there, even Sam, who had refused to stay on the medical ship despite his doctor's protests. His skin was pale and his hands trembled slightly, but his eyes were clear. We did good today, Laura said simply. I'm proud of every single one of you. What happens now, Captain? Daniel asked. Now we get back to work. We have cargo to deliver, colonies waiting for supplies. Laura smiled. The galaxy doesn't stop just because we pulled off the impossible. The crew laughed. It was a tired laugh, the kind that comes after surviving something that should have killed you. But it was genuine, and it was warm, and it was human. As the horizon's edge undocked and prepared to leave, Ambassador sent one final message. Laura read it on her personal screen. Captain, today you taught me something I will never forget. You taught me that logic has limits, that probability is not destiny, and that sometimes the greatest strength is simply refusing to accept defeat. I do not know what the future holds for humans in this galaxy, but I believe whatever challenges you face, you will meet them the same way you met this one, with courage, with determination, with humanity. Thank you for everything. May your journey be safe and your stars be bright. Laura saved the message and turned to face the stars ahead. Out there somewhere were other ships in trouble, other people who needed help, other impossible situations waiting for someone crazy enough to try. The horizon's edge was just a freighter. Her crew was just 15 ordinary humans, but ordinary humans had walked on moons and split atoms and crossed oceans in wooden ships. Ordinary humans had always done extraordinary things. It was not about being special. It was about being willing to try when everyone else had given up. Laura took her seat in the captain's chair and gave the order to jump. The stars stretched into lines, and the horizon's edge vanished into the darkness between worlds. Behind them, the survivors of the eternal dawn watched the small freighter disappear, and then a dozen other species, all united by a single thought. Those humans, they whispered to each other, those impossible, wonderful humans. And somewhere in the vast archives of the Galactic Union, a new entry was added to humanity's file, a simple notation that would be read by countless beings for generations to come. Species designation, human, Earth. Classification, special notation. When faced with impossible odds, do not expect rational behavior, expect miracles. It was the highest compliment the galaxy could give, and humans, being human, had earned it by simply being themselves.